Hello,
King James.
Jason, my man. How you doing today?
Doing well. It's been a while. How are you, sir?
Not bad, my friend. What do
Always.
I owe this honor tonight?
Well, everything is heating up there in Korea, and I know you've always got an inside line because of your family connections, and you are, I would say, a news hound. So I figured I would go right to you and see what you're hearing.
Well, first thing, this missile that they launched was been verified as a new missile, and please, I should have my wife here because my Korean is not this good, but it's Hwasong. Is that how you pronounce it? Hwasong
Hmm.
means Mars of all things, but it's a Hwasong 15. The missile is a new generation where they married up a couple of rocket engines, and it actually is a true ICBM when it's fully perfected, which is sometime in 2018. It will hit Washington, and
Wow.
so they say. And now it's just what all the articles are saying, and I'm just repeating what they're saying to me. So
Hmm.
it's definitely a step forward. This previous one that they launched right now, they arced it. They shot it almost straight up, and they claim that the missile itself went about 960 kilometers, geographically,
Mm-hmm.
okay,
Mm-hmm.
but it went almost 4,500 kilometers in an arc. They shot it as an arc, and when it came down, Jason, it came very close to Japan. Now it was in
Yeah.
their 300-mile international territorial limit, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's an interesting piece of equipment. And so that was the first thing. And of course, all the news, Korean and Japanese news, are all talking about it. And I forwarded one to you and different articles on it. So that was the first article I wanted to mention to you about.
Yeah, I
And
see
then
that.
the second one, um, they claim that it could be deployed and fully operational by 2018. I don't share that optimism because I don't think they have till December of 2018 to get this thing perfected because well, I don't want to sound too technical, but they reshaped the nose cone. It can now hold a variable multiple warhead, okay, on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
As I've been discussing with a couple of my friends the last couple of days who are a lot more knowledgeable than I, the Koreans don't have to hit New York.
Right.
All they have to do is arc this thing over, and Napoli will love this one. They just have to get it over L.A. 300 miles in the air
Right.
and set it off, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And of course, the EMP would do irreparable damage, right? So that's why it's very interesting. I know on the diplomatic front, which I've sent you several articles, they've had Trump and the president of Korea have talked, and they've officially up front talked about the diplomatic channels, which they want to pursue. Trump has come out and also said he's imposed sanctions. They want to, Tillerson, your Secretary of State's been talking to the Chinese and want them to restrict even further the oil flows, the oil imports.
Mm-hmm.
And your Secretary of State now, no, excuse me, your ambassador, Haley, that was it,
Right.
in the
Nikki
United
Haley.
Nations, that's her, had a speech yesterday, and she sounded more like the Secretary of Defense. And Jim Mattis is saying we haven't reached the military option yet. We still have diplomacy to work, and we're going to pursue all diplomatic channels. And meanwhile, Haley, I just caught the edge of her speech, and she said, make no mistake about it, if we have to take action, she put it, she said, there will be a regime change. We're not going out just to take out the missiles. We're going to take out the regime, which means, Kim, all his generals around him,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to take them all out. So that's a nice way to pressure, the other people around saying, do you really want to upset the Americans?
Mm-hmm.
So that's just what, you've been reading in the papers, and that's what's been coming down through. Now, again, Korean Times, as I was saying with the Korean Herald, has been saying that this missile, they believe, will be operational in 2018. And my so-called Ouija board that I talked to said It's going to be sooner than that. So we'll just leave it like that if we could. But it is real. There's new features in this missile too, and I'd almost say you'd say that people are helping them. I mean,
that's the question that I have. Is it, how do these guys have not even enough money for food, but yet they're developing intercontinental ballistic missiles? Who's helping them?
That's a very good question. And, you look around and say, who are the enemies of the Americans, right? And us.
I guess Iran.
North America. Yeah, and maybe China, Russia a little bit. Well, so what they said was it's a revolutionary step. It's a next generation. And so this missile will be able to hold multiple warheads or decoys. Right. Now, whether they can make them work or not, that's another thing. But it's like going from I'm going to call it a 57 Chevy to coming into a 2000 car, right? It is a jump forward, and the Americans are still so far ahead of them.
Right.
But that's not what they want. They just want to be able to say, we've got a missile that works, and they've proven it does, and it can go a long ways. All right. So that was the first thing, my friend. So, and the other thing that's interesting on this one is that they talked about the size of the mobile launcher, and I don't want to get real technical with people, but they're talking about the other one this one can be deployed on a 9-axis self-propelled launching vehicle. So, before they could target where they want to launch it from. Mm-hmm. Well, now this one, they can move it around. And again, I'm going to sound like a warmonger, and I'm not. You called me to ask my opinions.
Yeah.
The Russians are really good at mobile launchers.
Right.
Much better than anyone else. So, if I was to give a guess, my guess would be that there are some people that would love to see that the North Koreans get a little bit stronger. Now, Tillerson's been over, and he's been having meetings with China, and it says that they want to cut off the oil supply, but we both know that that's not going to happen. They'll restrict it, but they're not going to cut North Korea off completely.
Right.
And no matter what they say, because it's to their advantage to have North Korea the way it is, right? So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. And
when you say it's to their advantage to have North Korea the way it is, you mean it's kind of like a foil for the United States, where it creates trouble for us, and our enemies like that.
Correct. And that's why you can't blame the Japanese. Now, I did say, the Japanese have been reserved in the press, but privately they've expressed a lot of concerns.
I don't know if you saw the first episode of the new show that I'm doing with Jan Weinberg called The Audacity Files. Now,
yeah, I saw the one. I don't know how many episodes you had. I saw one.
One so far. We're going to do another one, I think, next week. But Jan's been putting this together for quite some time, and he's very focused on the emails between Hillary Clinton's State Department and Boeing and General Electric, which are obviously two huge military contractors. And one of the things that he covers in his book, The Win, which is all about Bernie Sanders and the election and all of that stuff, one of the things that he covers is what's called the pivot to Asia, which is, an Obama policy that we haven't heard all that much about. But part of what was done there that a lot of people don't realize is that Japan, for the first time since World War II, maybe you and I have discussed this in the past, they've been remilitarizing. They've been authorized to rebuild their military, and people in the region who are fearful of Japan. I remember I went to a film festival in China many years ago, and people in the United States may not realize the level of racism that exists in China, Japan, Korea. There's quite a lot of dislike,
animosity,
among Chinese people towards the Japanese, and the Japanese becoming more militant is something that will immediately raise the ire of the Chinese.
Mm-hmm. You're so correct. They passed their largest defense budget here just a few months ago, and their Prime Minister Abe, that Trump likes so much,
right?
He is quite nationalistic. Some people call him a hawkish or a warmonger, but he's very nationalistic. And They are rearming, and because they look around and they say, well, look what the North Koreans are doing, look what the Chinese are doing,
Right.
and they've always had skirmishes with Russia in the north, northern Japan, and their islands that they've disputed up there.
Mm-hmm.
So there has always been a distrust in that area. But
what's the forecast, King? What do you think is going to happen over there?
I still want to believe with all my heart that there will not be a war, even though I've said publicly that what has been expressed to me and what has been in the papers, that the generation that are 50 years old and older have a different opinion than the 35-year-olds, that if there is a war, let's get it over with and do what we have to, but they don't want one. The 35-year-olds absolutely, and the younger generation do not want war at all.
Yeah.
So I do believe there will not be one. I just don't see that. I want to readdress one thing you brought up, my friend. Is that, how did this missile perform the way it did? North Korea does not have the research capacities to be able to have these leapfrog like this.
Yeah, I mean, they don't have great universities over there. It's not like the best minds in the world are coming out of North Korea.
Correct, and it's leapfrogged in the capacity in the last 2 to 3 years. Like it's in dramatic stages, right? Yeah. And it's not like they've got a huge research budget like the Americans can do. Like your DARPA, which speaking of universities, they finance half the universities in the country, through different programs, and then they put it all together and use it for military applications. So they don't have that. And that's the one that's questioned me. I got a question on how does this technology advance so quickly? We're not talking cars. We're talking ICBM missiles.
Right.
And then the second thing is they proved the last time that they shot off a 150 kiloton hydrogen bomb.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So how do you go from an atomic bomb to a hydrogen bomb of that size? To me, you go and you buy it somewhere. That's my 2 cents worth. I mean, I don't think they had magically built it because the complexity is so much more intense to build one's fusion and one's fission, right?
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to split an atom, but when you have to have 4 or 5 contact points trigger at the same time to condense something and to make fusion, that's special. That's really technical stuff. So you ask me what do I think will happen. I think that the Chinese will say, you know what, we have to do something. And that they will go and they will have all of a sudden the Kim regime will be removed. That's my hope. It's not going to come from inside the country. And it's certainly not going to come from South Korea unless they try to take them out. If they do, that'll start a war too. But I think that my prediction would be is that the Chinese will wake up and realize that the Americans aren't fooling this time. They're not going to let that missile fly. As they said, by the end of 2018, it will be perfected, and they'll be able to lob them into Washington.
Right.
Now, I know we're going to talk about space-based lasers and all the different stuff that the Americans have to shoot them down, and they do. But it's clear and present danger, I guess, is the terminology you use, and you can't allow that to happen. They just can't.
Right. Right. Well, I mean, from the outside observing, it seems like Trump is making headway from a diplomatic standpoint in terms of forging personal relationships with the president of China and the prime minister of Japan. So that seems like positive motion.
Well, I agree. And the other thing is that there's something that's happened here since we talked last, and of course it's the publication of the Paradise Papers, which was not a fluke. That was to expose all the illegal money laundering and all the offshore accounts, that were legal, so that came out. Right. Also, we talked about what happened in Saudi Arabia. Right. That's all happened. Right. Well, something didn't get mentioned that to me is as shocking as what happened with the Sauds, right? And And I'm all for this. I mean, I believe they're shaking him up, and I do believe in these 5,000 or 2,500 sealed indictments. Every time you read it, it's a
Yeah,
different
it's
number.
going up, right.
But they can't all be Trumps. I mean, he doesn't have 2,500 people inside the White House. So,
right.
There's going to be a lot of people coming down. Well, this is what I'm talking about. I sent an article to you, it was 2 weeks ago, and it talked about, and I looked on it, and I said, this can't be possible. I thought it was just a hoax. India takes part in the first ever military drill with Israel. Indian troops took part in the first ever joint military exercise with their Israeli counterparts yesterday. Elite Indian pilots and soldiers participated in war drills. Okay, so you say, well, what's so important about that? That doesn't mean anything. Well, yeah, it does, because the Indians sent over 1,000 personnel there. How do I say this? Now, India is first of all, it is the largest democracy in the planet. Okay, and it's also the largest English-speaking democracy on the planet. Mm-hmm. People may not realize is that it's the sixth largest economy in the world. They have the third largest army. They're 1.2 billion people, mm-hmm. and nuclear power. They weren't really aligned to America. They were buying a lot of Russian equipment, and they kind of kept their nose clean, even though that they really were tied back into the Rothschilds. And I'm sorry to keep bringing that up, but with the East Indian Trading Company, they from the mid 1850s, the Rothschilds and the British helped run basically China, and they also did India. And in 1947 they nationalized it, and they still kept very tight relations. So, but India wasn't really, I wouldn't say pro NATO. It was just kind of neutral. Well, for them to side in with the Israelis, that is a major shift of power, because the Chinese' biggest threat always were the Indians. And because they're 1.2 billion people, right? They're a land power, and they can match them man for man as far as soldiers go. Now, the Chinese have a little bit better equipment, but the Indians are no slouch. Okay, So for that to happen, I said, why did that happen in Israel, like of all places? So it tied in at the same time this thing was going on with in Saudi Arabia, and I said, wow, this is and it didn't get mentioned in your media, but it's there. You can see it, and I sent it over to you, the picture.
What do you expect their purpose is?
I think it's funny. It's comical. The article I sent you, it says, and it came from Al Jazeera, right? It says, the UAE and Israel are like brothers, said the senior general of UAE. Right. Israel and UAE are doing combined exercises. Well, then they go on to say that the UAE guy says, well, we've got the same uncle, meaning you guys, right? Right. So you've got Saudi Arabia, UAE, now you've got India, you've got all these people coming together, Europe, America, Canada, Australia, Japan. And I don't want to say this, but it's scary, because who are they going to go after? Iran. Yeah. Iran, right? Yeah. Now you and I have had this conversation, and I want to say to my people at Crowdsource the Truth, like, we've had hours of conversations earlier, and you're a very, very smart man, and you know a lot about world politics. So I want to bring this forth, is that Wesley Clark, former general of NATO, he's been on a lot of talk shows, and he said he went in after 9/11, and one of the guys said, we're going after all these 5 countries, right? Yeah. And he said, you're crazy. Well, rattle them off. They got Libya, thanks to Hillary.
Iraq, Iran, Syria, Libya.
Afghanistan, right?
Afghanistan.
And the only one they missed on there, they said they haven't got Iran yet. So they did 4 or 5.
I think they added Libya, 2 more, Somalia and Sudan, didn't they?
Oh, yeah, since then, but this is the original 5. You're right. And so now you think about it from one perspective, they're going to take out Iran. Now, call me conspiracy nut, okay? And I like Quinn Michaels, I really do. The guy's way out of my league, but he's got some different ideas. But anyway, so I'm on the same thing. On my conspiracy side, when you turn around and you look over here and you say, okay, the Rothschilds and the powers to be, they've said, we don't care about who makes the laws. As long as we make your money, we don't care, right? Mm-hmm. And we all know, we've had those discussions at World War II, they financed both sides.
Yeah.
Same with Henry Ford. Exxon was there.
Yeah.
We've talked about that a lot of different, and they financed both sides. Same in the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I look back and say, oh my God, if they take Iran out, if they take Iran out, they just took everybody off the list. And if you're a Rothschild, and we're all looking at, oh, we're going to get Hillary, we're going to get Bill, isn't this wonderful? We're going to get Obama. What do they really care? The Bushes at best would be, billionaires at the best, and the same with the Clintons and Obamas. They're not in these guys' league. And they said at one time the Rothschild Group had controlled 51% of the world's money supply.
Wow.
So, they'll throw anybody underneath the bus, and we're too busy chasing Hillary, and I want to see her to go to jail. Don't get me wrong. I want that to happen. But on the big scheme of things, the Rothschild says, yeah, well, we got them. And to crowdsource the truth, why those 5 countries were important, because the last 3 countries on the planet that aren't controlled by the Rothschild banking system were Syria, Iran, and North Korea. And so, my friend, we're talking conspiracy here right now, but all the facts point, and it doesn't look good. My inside source told me, my Ouija board said, the biggest concern is a mistake. If he shoots a missile off and it happened to hit Japan,
right?
The Japanese said, we're going to attack him.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
This is privately, okay? Because they can't let a missile come down and hit their country.
No.
And then the South Koreans said, well, if they go, we go, right?
Right.
And of course, you guys have a treaty that says if they go, well, then the Americans go. So we're on a hair trigger for an accident. So I don't think a war will happen. I'm just praying to the good Lord that please, when he shoots these missiles, please hit where he's aiming, because if an accident happens, my friend, it is just a powder keg over there, and that's just being realistic. You can read the newspapers, you can follow it. I'm not a warmonger, I've come across sometimes like that, but I wish Mr. Hudson was here to give me some more, give some clarification on this. But the reality is that this is where we are.
Yeah.
Do I think Donald Trump wants war? I don't believe so, but I know what he's not going to. Should no president ever allow North Korea to get intercontinental working missiles.
Bill Clinton helped them get that technology, so.
No question. And Mr. Obama's cash deal there with the Iranians, I mean, when you really read that from an outside source looking in, what do you mean a C-130 full of cash just dropped off? Do you know how many $20 bills or whatever they have you can fit in a C-130?
Yeah, well, I'm sure they would use hundreds, and the answer is quite a lot. I think you could fit 6 tanks in there.
So my point is that it's just ridiculous. So when this thing's all coming together, my friend, I think that there won't be a war. I'm betting on the Chinese that they will lean heavily on the North Koreans, and they may say to Mr. Kim, look, you got a choice, lose the nuclear weapons, or maybe you come over here and we're going to have a place in China for you. This is where you're going to stay, and we're going to replace you with somebody else. Now, I know that sounds optimistic, and that's different from where I was, 6 months ago, but I really do believe that China is the only one that can do that. Just on the side, you've been doing really well with these different guests, And I know some people have been taking some shots at you, and people don't really realize it. I mean, you work 18 hours a day. I mean, we're talking right now, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, this is 11 o'clock at night. And when you see this program, it might be tomorrow. But every time we do a show, I mean, it's 11 and 12 o'clock at night. The man never sleeps.
Yeah,
and nor do I.
It's a lot of work. It is a lot of work, and I've been trying, King James. We were at about 30. We just passed 33,000 YouTube subscribers today, so the channel's growing nicely. And I'm just trying to get firsthand information from different sources like yourself, people who come forward from the crowdsourced community, whether they be known YouTubers or journalists, or we obviously Charles Ortel, Thomas Paine, all the different people that we have coming forward and participating in the show. But yet somehow I get accused of being disinfo. I don't really understand what that is. I don't even want to go there to that.
Well, of all the weird places in my research for doing this, I went around tonight, and on the Japanese Times, they were talking about Cox, and they were selling Bitcoin, and it collapsed in early 2002.
The Mount Gox thing, right? It's amazing how people have forgotten about that already, but that's something, this is a very new system. I mean, just yesterday there was so much volatility in the price of Bitcoin. The Coinbase exchange couldn't handle the capacity, and it went down.
No question. And the last thing on the line here, it said, I thought, wow. There's an interesting article says, and today, if all the stolen coins would be worth over $6 billion, Reuters has calculated.
Wow.
I said, $6 billion. Now, I guess my 2 cents worth, where Juicer and where I made my public statements on it, is that there was an article here in Globe and Mail a couple of days ago, and they were talking about, and it was so interesting, your article yesterday when you were interviewing the stockbrokers, right?
Yeah.
Some of them couldn't talk.
Right.
And they knew, because you could tell by their faces, they knew stuff, but they couldn't talk on camera. And I'm sure some of them talked to you privately off camera.
No, they all just walked away.
And the other ones just said, well, it's too new, it's not regulated. Well, this article in the Globe and Mail said that at the end of the day, we're talking about the World Bank system, they can collapse it if they want. And people say, oh, no, you can't. Yeah, they can, because they can just outlaw and say, well, we won't take Bitcoin as payment. Right. And when you're talking about the Bank of International Settlements that controls all all the wealth, they can do crazy things. And I want it to work. I really do. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm going to say one last thing. When Quinn told us about the robot, and Sophia Hansen, right, and she's a citizen in Saudi Arabia. Yeah. I tried to find it, but I couldn't find it yesterday. But I was, again, watching news, and CBC came on, and then there was another article, and it said, and this was global news out of Toronto, came in and said, the Japanese diet. Okay, there's a movement to come before the diet. Okay, to recognize. Get this now. It's a male-dominated society. Mm-hmm. That if a man marries a robot, they will recognize it.
What?
Now it was on the television. I'm sitting in the restaurant and I watched that. And my buddy said, "What do you know about that?" I said, "Well, a month ago they made one head of citizen." And I said, Japan has really been in the forefront of all this stuff, but that's what it said, that they're undertaken to recognize that if they, a union between a human and a robot. And I thought, look, I'm 60 years old. This stuff is, this is way out of my league. I'm just repeating it. And then when I find it again, I looked at it tonight. I couldn't find it anywhere, but I'm going back on the global feed and send it to you, because they're usually pretty accurate. They pick it up somewhere. Yeah. And the other last one was, he mentioned about robots, and I sent you the article. There's a competition of 5 different dancing robots. You probably hadn't had a chance to watch it.
I haven't seen that.
And man, those 5 robots walked out on the stage, each one of them. They looked like us. They spun around and they danced. Each one did something different. And I kept thinking to myself, Michaels is right. You know, like, I'm not in touch with this stuff. My idea of robots are industrialized robots, you know, that work on, you know, manufacturing and things. But, like, so thank you, Quinn. Thank you for bringing this stuff to our attention.
You know, I'll tell you one other thing, King James, that brings it back into your sort of, you know, Asia Pac realm. There was a major shift in the world of robotics in 2011.
How so?
After the Fukushima nuclear disaster, the problem of the main containment facility failing was the result of their inability to open a valve or close a valve because a particular room was being flooded with, I think, radioactive gas or liquid. So a human couldn't go in there and close the valve or open the valve to stop the problem, and they wanted to send in a robot. But as you just pointed out, prior to 2011, the main focus in the world of robotics was purpose-built robots like a giant arm to weld a car or paint a car, or, you know, a machine to, you know, manufacture something in a specific way. And they just didn't have any anthropomorphic humanoid robots that could, you know, walk into a room and use human tools and turn knobs and do those kinds of things. So since then, DARPA has made a major push towards, you know, they got the Atlas robot from Boston Dynamics, and basically, you know, now they've shifted much more towards these humanoid robots, bipedal robots with 5 fingers and the ability to integrate with human tools and all that kind of stuff.
Sure have. And the mule, I mean, they've had DARPA's advanced a lot of things. And the exoskeletons are talking about as well. You're right. You're absolutely correct.
Yeah.
So I wanted to thank, you know, Quinn. I said when, you know, the AI singularity he talks about, you know, we're very familiar with the AI intelligence because it was all, you know, based on quantum computers. And again, as you knew, the previous conversation we had many, many months ago, different nephew altogether, but he worked in Cheyenne Mountain, and he's been in the hole in up in North Bay, and anyway, he flew with the AWACS. Well, his project that he was working with and was on was this, you know, the idea of the thought-controlled helmet, right? Put the helmet on and you can control different weapon systems. So he worked on that. You know, he's a computer engineer. Well, there's a I'll show you. There's a YouTube on yesterday from Japan, and it shows the 2-handed robot, and it's for manufacturing, right? And they've got a woman with the helmet on with all the little wires, and, you know, me being epileptic, I told you I'm used to having an EEG and all the different wires in your head. Well, same idea. And she showed how it worked. And the robot had to pick up a red part. There was 2 part bends, a red one and a blue one. So, you know, it picks up the red one, and she says to the announcer, she said, no, he's supposed to pick up the blue one. She puts the helmet on, doesn't say a word. The robot puts the red one back in and picks up the blue one. Okay. And that technology exists. I mean, it's just electrical, right? So when you talk about DARPA and all these robotics and things that are happening, it's absolutely true. Well, I'll tell you this. I'm glad we have these conversations. Because I'll tell you, Jason, what you have done is that you've doubled the sponsorship in less than 2 months. And I think that goes back to what we had our first original conversation. You know, you have people of integrity, which you do, and you have different varieties. And like you've had, like, Jason, I can't say enough, like you've had excellent people of different backgrounds. And as long as we keep doing that, this will grow. And I'm more concerned about you burning yourself out because, you know, I'm 60 and I'm used to working 18 hours a day because I'm stupid and I don't know any better. But, you know, a young man like you, you know, I suppose maybe you're used to that working in the movie industry, but it'll take a few years. But my friend, you're gonna look back and you'll have InfoWars. And the thing is, and I don't mean that. That's the only biggest one online I know. I don't watch it a lot because he gets on his soapbox and preaches. But I guess they're the largest one with a couple of million viewers. But Jason, it will happen. And because what's happening now is that you have good people that want to come on your show.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that, myself, I'm just a small little cog, so you'll hear me every 2 months, that's fine. But because I'm excited about the different people you have on.
Right.
And the only plug I'll put is someday people have asked me, and I keep plugging, and I said, before 2018, I really do believe that, you can organize crowdsource the truth. You have different people in different states and different cities, so that like what you did there, which was beautiful at your Congress, when you gave out those books, okay?
Yeah.
Well, the problem is that you're only one man, you can't follow up.
Right.
Well, if you had an army of 200 people, in these different places, including across Canada, and I would gladly help, okay, in Canada, and say, you know what, we need to tell our politicians about this. And like here's my pet peeve. You've heard me say it 4 or 5 times. They're about to pass again a renew Bill 702, which is your Security Surveillance Act, and they say you absolutely have to have it.
Right.
And I have a problem with that because it cuts both ways. One side of me says, all you guys are doing is selling fear. If we didn't have those surveillance, there's going to be a few people get through.
Right.
But look at what you're giving up, okay? But then the other side, maybe because you have so much surveillance ability, you're uncovering more things. But there's a very, very fine line between civil liberty, okay, and the state being in your bedroom.
Yeah.
And we have proven under Obama and George Bush, okay, that it went too far the other way.
Mm-hmm. Well, King, I want to thank you for those kind words.
Have a good night, my friend.
You have a good night as well, and I'll speak to you very soon, King James. Thanks very much.
Hope so. Pleasure. Bye-bye.
Take care.